Okay, hello. This week's video is a little delayed because I was at the Austin GP. I will post a vlog about that and all the stuff I saw, the drivers I saw. Wasn't able to get any autographs, but it's fine. At least I got to see the race. But before I go into the breakdown of what happened, essentially, not that much. I will say overall the race was kind of boring, but I am very happy with the result. But let's take a look at qualifying and how everyone did in qualifying to just get an idea of exactly how things played out given the starting positions. So we have Lando Norris on pole position, which not that surprising. Max Verstappen in second, third Sainz, fourth Leclerc, five Piastri, six Gasly somehow, seven Fernando Alonso, eight Kevin Magnussen, nine Sergio Perez, and 10 Yuki. One interesting thing to note is that Lawson was 19 and George Russell was in P20 because he crashed in Q3 of qualifying. I'm going to be honest, this qualifying was a bit of a disaster because George Russell bottled it on the last turn of a lot of people's fastest laps. They couldn't do it because obviously time was up. There was nothing more that they could do, and there was a yellow flag. Because of that, Max Verstappen could have gotten pole, Carlos Sainz could have gotten pole, and that could have changed the race trajectory a lot. It could have changed things a lot. I'm just looking at the thing to sort of see if there's anything that stands out. Franco Colapinto started 15, and Lewis Hamilton started 17. This was actually kind of funny because it was like Mercedes 21 again, because you had Lewis and Bottas right next to each other, even though they're at the bottom of the grid. I still think that Mercedes, this engineer, I don't think Toto Wolff has anything to do with it, but they are purposely sabotaging him because you're salty as shit. Like, oh my god, you're leaving us, but it's like, your car is ass. Your car is bad. Anywho, so now let me just talk about um the race in general. I was there. I was there in person. Um, so I can very much say the first 10 laps, good to watch. The last 5 laps, chef's kiss, amazing. Um, let's start. Let's start off from the bottom and up. Lewis Hamilton unfortunately DNF'd, and he came dead last. What happened? I honestly don't know. I think from what I saw, at least live, I didn't watch the highlights because I was there. I saw it happen. But the back of his car just gave out and he spun, and yeah, I don't know what exactly happened. His car, the back gave out. He hit the barrier. Very disappointing. Not in Hamilton. Hamilton is such a technically phenomenal driver. He doesn't make mistakes like this very often. I think the car was sabotaged. Some shit happened. His car was not good. You can tell the car's not good. He's upset. I just hope he gets a podium and hopefully, maybe get a win. It's difficult with the current Mercedes, I'm going to be honest. They were good in the middle with like Silverstone, Austria, and then the race where George DNF'd, but they have not been able to recreate that magic. There is another team who has been able to recreate magic, which we will get to later. Then it's your usual, um, interesting. As we noted, Colapinto was P15 or P14 rather. He got P10. He finished points. He was ahead of Albon. Now, why is that such an interesting case to study? Is because for the longest time, Albon at Williams has not had competition. He had, I'm going to be honest, don't know who was before Logan Sargent. Probably some bad, horrible driver. I'm going to be frankly honest. Irrelevant information. Then we had Logan Sargent, who unfortunately I think was not able to keep up with F1. I think he was put in too early, but and bygones be bygones. It happened. It happened. We have to move on. And Colapinto has been phenomenal. The first few races, I thought maybe the heck. I thought maybe it was a fluke of sorts. Maybe he just sort of got lucky with everything. He got lucky that he's been doing good race after race after race, but no, he's consistently good, and he I don't know if he's beating Albon. I think this race was just bad for Albon in general. He had a tough time this weekend every single time. Sprint qualifying, sprint itself, the race itself, the qualifying itself. He's had a hard time. Um, but yeah, I think he is under pressure, and especially with Carlos going there next year, I think he's going to be under a lot of pressure. Because let's be honest, Carlos Sainz is such a phenomenal technical driver that he can make any car, he can push any car to its limits in which the car can handle. Um, and hopefully he joins. I don't. I think McLaren. See, a part of me wants Carlando back, but if I'm being realistic, I don't see that happening again. Especially considering they have two young, phenomenal drivers. I think Audi, if they're competitive, he will jump ship as he should, unless Williams can somehow redo magic. I don't know. I can't tell. Um, Lawson came 9. He started 19, and he came 9. Phenomenal drive from Lawson. He's done amazing. However, I've seen some people online share a similar sentiment that, oh my god, he's just better than Yuki. No, this was just Yuki just he made a couple of mistakes, which is why he ended up in P14. I still think Yuki is such a phenomenal driver. He is arguably, not arguably, he is better than Lawson. He is better than Perez. Let's just put that out there. He is. And I think him and Max Verstappen drive very similarly in a similar setup. Um, we'll get into that part later, but I think this was great from Lawson's part. He really needed to prove himself. Granted, only 2 points, but still great drive. He did amazing. Um, but still, I would have to say that yeah, I think it was a fluke, to be honest with you. I don't think I still think Yuki is much more better. Problem is he isn't able to be consistent, which I think is the problem of the car itself because Yuki pushes the car and the car's just not there. And Red Bull's car is. So I think he should be in that Red Bull seat, to be frankly honest with you. But anyway, we'll talk about we'll talk about Perez later. Hulkenberg came 8th. Phenomenal, amazing. Not entirely surprised. He's been consistently able to get that Haas up there. I don't know what happened. They did amazing in qualifying though, in the sprint race. Speaking of, if you guys don't know, um, what's his face? Verstappen took the um he took the race win for the sprint, which is amazing to see. And more to be honest, after such a long time of Verstappen not being, winning a race, that sprint was fun to watch. Lando was P2. I was afraid that the gap between the championship would increase exponentially. Um, we'll get to why that isn't the case. But he came first. Lando came. No, Carlos came second. And Lando came in third, so he gained 2 points of he increased the gap by 2 more points. Um, and we'll talk about the race later. But anywho, that was amazing to see. But the main point is both of the Haas's came 7th and 8th. I think they were dead last out of the top 8, but they both got points for the sprint race. In the actual race, Nico Hulkenberg managed to get 8th, which I think was absolutely phenomenal to see. Sergio Perez came 7th. I think he is getting better slowly. If I remember correctly, he was P10 in Singapore, which is a notoriously difficult race. So, I don't think this is a return to form for him. I think he usually does better in the America races. It's purely a mental thing. Um, but now let's talk about Red Bull. The thing that I've seen and sort of like after discussing with some people that are really into like the nitty gritty of F1, the Red Bull car is built in a way that is specifically built for Max Verstappen, which is why every single of his teammates have struggled to keep up with him because the car is built for him. The beginning of 23, they had such a strong, such a neutral car that both favored Sergio Perez and favored Max Verstappen at the same time. And at the point where Toto had the famous, I have it printed out, that was the infamous point of which the car shifted from being a neutral car to more of a Max Verstappen car. And Sergio Perez had to deal with the consequences, which is out of his control. There's nothing he could have done because they were like, oh no, Max is just doing good. Yeah, no shit, you're building the car for him. Like, are you a dumbass? Anywho, Because of that, Sergio Perez has been consistently struggling even this season itself, and I see a lot of people joking. I mean, I have joking that oh my god, like he's not that good. Like he's just not good. The question is, the car isn't built to be a neutral car. He has to learn how to drive like Verstappen, which I think he slowly is. But again, Sergio Perez doesn't thrive in that. He thrives in whatever style that he is. I really don't know. I really can't tell. But we've seen in the beginning of 2023. We've seen in what was called BMT, Force India, what it was called. He did phenomenal in those cars. He is a good driver. He's a great driver. He's just not being given a car that suits him. He's given ma- sorry, I don't he's given a car that's like this is the Max Verstappen car. The Max Verstappen can do really good in, deal with it. Someone who I think can thrive in that car is Yuki Tsunoda because Yuki Tsunoda and Max Verstappen drive very similarly. Their car setups are very similar. I think both of them would be a phenomenal one-two pairing for Red Bull, and I don't think dominate. I think Ferrari and McLaren are up there. Mercedes maybe we'll have to wait and see how 26 plays out, but I think Yuki would be a perfect fit for that car. He'd be great in that car. But we'll talk about that later. George Russell came sixth, which was absolutely phenomenal. He started in the pit lane because he had to do some changes. And yes, granted, you could say Lewis Hamilton DNF'd, he would have been P7, but still, pit lane, delayed start, sorry, all the way to P6. Again, granted, they have the fourth fastest car. That is where the car should be. That's not entirely surprising, but starting 20th, coming here, is an amazing drive. You have to admit, whether the car is up to that standard or not, because Sergio Perez came 10th, I think it was 10th in the qualifying, and he came 7th. That's 3 places climbed. George climbed way more. He climbed more than 10 positions, which is insanely difficult to do, and you have to give credit where credit is due. That was a phenomenal drive. Um, Piastri 5th. Honestly, I think notoriously, both of the McLarens were struggling. I was told that they thrive in hotter temperatures, which is why Austin being surprisingly colder than it usually is, um, was not in their favor, but they still put out a phenomenal job. Um, Lando Norris came fourth. We'll talk about that because Verstappen came third. But anywho, if you saw the race, I will give you my perspective as someone who's there. Lap by lap, you could see Verstappen, and the gap between Verstappen and Norris was kind of noticeable. And lap by lap, it got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until one point where they started actually fighting each other. It was wheel to wheel battle. It was the most beautiful thing of that race by far. We'll talk about one and two. You've probably guessed what it is, but we'll get to it. But such a phenomenal drive, such a phenomenal fight. It was beautiful to see. Max Verstappen was defending like crazy. Lando Norris was attacking like crazy. Max Verstappen pushes Lando Norris off the track. Lando Norris, forced off the track, gets ahead of Verstappen. And then Verstappen tries to overtake him a couple of times, and Lando Norris just reads him like a book. Any decision Max Verstappen made, Lando Norris had an answer to it. He knew how to defend. He knew how to drive. He just knew it all. That was amazing to see. Because the biggest complaint I've had is like, I love Lando. I want him to win the championship, but he couldn't fight with Max. He just didn't know how to. And it really feels like over this past fall break, all he's done is see how Max drives, how can I counter him, how can I sort of find an advantage in his attacks, and how can I play the slight game that he does against him. And he did that beautifully. But the FIA being the FIA and making stupid ass decisions, I mean, the FIA is a joke. No one really gives a shit about what they have to say. They're the laughing stock. Anyway, moving on. What a phenomenal drive from Lando Norris. That was beautiful to see. He deserved third. I'm going to be honest, but he had to give the position back. I think he managed to grow the gap between both of them to like 3.5 or like around 4 seconds, which was again phenomenal. That was amazing to see. Um, but still, I think Lando Norris deserved the third position. But anywho, if you do the math, Um, During the sprint race itself, I don't know actually. We'll look into it right now before we discuss 1 and 2. But Verstappen has now gained a 3 point advantage in the gap that currently existed between him and Lando in the championship due to the main race, right? And then in the sprint race, he gained another 2 points. So he gained 6 points. And I don't know who got fastest lap. Because let me see who took it. Hold up. What the heck? Okay, yeah. It was Esteban Ocon who got the fastest lap, so Lando didn't get the point. So yes, it was still a 6 point gap that has increased. I'll have a breakdown of the championship between each race because again things can change so much, and we'll talk about Ferrari. But let's talk about Ferrari now. A Ferrari 1-2. What a beautiful sight to see. Again, it's been since 2006 that Ferrari has had a 1-2 within the States. And to see that as my first race was just such a beauty to behold. Charles Leclerc winning the Grand Prix was amazing. Again, great. I'll talk about the nitty gritty information. Signs on podium, getting P2 in the sprint race, getting P2 in the race, being extremely consistent and oh my god, it was beautiful. It was amazing. A grown man would cry. He only has 5 more races left with Ferrari, and he's trying his best to win another one to sort of go out on glory. This was amazing to see. It was absolutely phenomenal. Carlos Sainz he cooked the entire weekend. If you have not got a chance to watch the sprint race, watch it. Watch it. Please watch it. So good. He starts fourth. Leclerc is third. They're fighting it out. Sainz being aggressive as shit, trying to overtake Verstappen. Trying to overtake Leclerc, does it after like 4 attempts. Then he guns after Norris like a shark, overtakes Norris, and then he's pretty close to overtaking Verstappen, but then the race ends. A few more laps, I think he could have done it. Phenomenal drive. And honestly, I think this race was Carlos's to win. The gap between him and Leclerc was 6 seconds, which again sounds like a lot, but Ferrari had crazy pace. If he wanted to, I think he could. I think Ferrari opted for a guaranteed 1-2 strategy rather than having them fight and maybe one of them DNFing or both of them DNFing. So it is what it is. I think Carlos could have gotten it. I think it should have gone to Carlos, but as a Carlos fan, I am happy with a P2. I just hope he stays consistent. He gets consistent podiums, maybe a win. I just want one more win with him in Ferrari. That's all I want out of the season, and I will be happy. He cooked. He cooked. Oh my god. Unfortunately, I did not get to see the podium, which I'm very upset about, but it is what it is. But uh, yeah, that is the race breakdown. I will quickly go over the top 5. If you guys were like, what the happened because I had a few intermissions, Leclerc won the race. He got in P1. P2 went to Ferrari. Ferrari won 2. Verstappen came 3rd. And Lando came 4th. Piastri came 5th. This isn't entirely shocking. Top 3 cars are in the top 3 minus Perez, but it's the car's problem. Anywho, now if we look at I'm just gonna briefly cover it in this video, and I'll do a more detailed breakdown. But if we go to the drivers' championship, we won't talk about constructors because that deserves a conversation of its own. But currently, the again, if you watch my last video about the breakdown, but Max Verstappen now has 354, Lando Norris has 297. It's a big gap. It is difficult. It is doable. But the issue I have is the way that those two were fighting. They're gonna go at it anytime they're close to each other because this gap is not about winning a race anymore. This is about making sure you keep extending or keep shortening this gap. Lando's going to do everything he can to get ahead of Verstappen. Verstappen's going to do everything he can to keep him in the back. I think it's going to result in one of them DNFing or both of them DNFing. And I don't know, I think FAA maybe wants to create a situation similar to 21 where the gap gets so short to Abu Dhabi that everyone's like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? And then they're gonna do some stupid ass shit like they always do. Anyhow, Leclerc is in third, 275. I was afraid when I made the last video before Austin that maybe Oscar Piastri could take P3, steal that from him, but this is going pretty good for him, coming P1, winning that race. Again, I've seen some delusion online that Leclerc he can beat Verstappen, he can take the championship. I don't think it's happening. He'll have to win every single race and have Verstappen not podium at all, or even get in the points at some race in order for that to happen, which is just nearly impossible. Can he take P2? Maybe if Ferrari keeps the pace, he can take P2. But we'll have to wait and see. Piastri is fourth. Carlos Sainz is 215. I think if he wins a race and a few more races, I think he can come back and take fourth. I don't think he's taking third. I think unless some magic happens, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. And if Mercedes doesn't shit the bed with Lewis, if they do, George might place higher than Hamilton, which is just shocking to say the least.